Burkina Faso is located in the Sahel region of Africa, therefore what the Western countries were afraid would not occur there. The president of Burkina Faso revealed his literally groundbreaking future intentions in a recent interview. He is a genius, and the plans he proposes have the potential to bring all of Africa together. Under his proposals, foreign soldiers and assistance will never be required for any African country struggling with terrorism. Instead, the African nations will unite and support one another, rendering the Western nations completely inconsequential in the area. African nations might then make use of their natural riches, protect them, and refrain from overexploitation. When his interview was broadcast live in the West, it sent shockwaves across the continent, upending all of Europe's grand dreams for Africa. He effectively sealed the deal by declaring that the Burkina Faso elections will not take place until he finds a solution to the country's security issue. How will he go about doing that? In this video, let's find out. No one could have predicted that the youthful leader of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore, would have ambitions to transform the continent of Africa when he took office in October 2022. Indeed, he had come not just to transform Burkina Faso, but also to transform Africa as a whole and establish it as the dominant continent in the globe. He kept these plans to himself since, at the time, they would have been viewed with suspicion if they had been disclosed. But now that he has been in charge for a year and has gathered all of his forces, he has finally spoken his mind. He stated in an interview that you usually don't stay inside the table itself when trying to safeguard a table's edges. Instead, you go above and above with your efforts. Would terrorism have established itself in Niger or Mali if African nations had supported them since 2012? He expressed doubt about it. According to him, African nations did nothing and assumed it would only have an impact on others. This pattern is also seen in a number of nearby states. They make the error of not expecting comparable events. His case was straightforward. Foreign soldiers and assistance would never be required if African nations had assisted one another. The argument emphasizes the necessity of addressing security risks with proactive and preventive measures, particularly with regard to counter-terrorism efforts in the Sahel region. The comparison to guarding a table's perimeter emphasizes how crucial it is to provide assistance beyond its immediate bounds in order to stop security threats from spreading. Yes, that is a very clever plan. It states that African governments must fight terrorism outside of their borders rather than inside their own countries. This implies that they must work together to begin a larger anti-terrorism operation. The analogy of guarding a table's perimeter emphasizes how crucial it is to adopt proactive defense tactics as opposed to reactive ones. It highlights how important it is to address security concerns early on in order to prevent them from getting worse and expanding to nearby locations. It is possible that the rise in terrorism and instability may have been avoided by taking proactive steps, such as providing assistance and support to neighboring nations that are in danger. This theory also suggests that the rise in terrorism in these regions is a result of insufficient assistance for countries such as Mali and Niger. It highlights the value of ongoing assistance and coordination with surrounding nations, highlighting the part that regional cooperation plays in halting the spread of security risks. It is suggested that the development of terrorism in the region might have been prevented by a cooperative strategy amongst surrounding states. Ibrahim Traore emphasized that the Sahel nations, who are all facing terrorism, must have joint security. He acknowledged the shortcomings in the strategy for handling security issues, suggesting that some nations have not properly recognized the possible threats in their local neighborhood. Nonetheless, by admitting these mistakes, a more thorough and proactive security strategy that transcends national lines can be developed. He went on to say that adopting a proactive attitude is the most successful strategy for self-defense. This supports the claim made by some Western countries that they should intervene in the Sahel in order to stop terrorism before it enters their borders. It also has to do with safeguarding the nearby community. There's no excuse for staying in the background. According to him, Allowing Nigeria to become unstable will create a precedent for other nearby nations, especially in light of Libya's aftermath, which filled the area with weaponry and eventually fueled the emergence of terrorism. He declared that we cannot permit the circumstances in Nigeria to recur. Africa must thus address this rationally. We must take action when Africa is under danger. As nations participate in this endeavor, protecting the individual nations in the area is the main goal rather than just defending Niger. As such, aid from all African nations is required. He issued a dire warning that Burkina would suffer if unrest breaks out in Niger. Burkina Faso is acting accordingly already. It's not quite deployed yet, but it's working closely. A group that the Nigerians detected on their way back to the Burkina Faso region was eliminated just last week, thanks to flawless coordination between air units. The military of Burkina Faso, he claimed, intervened with perfect coordination. This is the strategy that Burkina Faso is supporting. Ibrahim Traore encapsulated the entirety of the African continent's terrorism issue. He made it apparent that African nations needed to take charge of their own destiny, rather than depending on foreign forces and assistance. This is due to the fact that fighting terrorism is impossible if nations are divided and each has its own objectives. A nation will unavoidably be impacted by terrorism in a nearby country. Therefore, African nations must cooperate because they view it as essential to their existence. That's his plan, and he's already begun to put it into practice. Instead of depending exclusively on foreign forces and assistance, African nations may choose to work together in the fight against terrorism, which might have a number of important ramifications and possible results. Cooperation among the Sahel states, for instance, might lead to better security protocols and coordinated counter-terrorism efforts. Through cooperative military exercises and intelligence exchange, the area can strengthen its ability to counter security risks. It's added, enhanced cooperation is probably going to help keep the Sahel region more stable overall. Collaborative efforts between adjacent nations can lessen the consequences of terrorism across borders and reduce interstate conflicts by promoting mutual trust and understanding. Local security forces would be empowered by a coordinated strategy to counter terrorism and be able to take a more active part in resolving security issues. Increasing the capacity of the country's security and defense forces could encourage independence and self-governance in managing security-related matters. A country's sovereignty and autonomy are frequently compromised by an over-reliance on foreign soldiers and assistance, as the Sahel region has previously demonstrated. Thus, by working together regionally, Sahelian nations may promote a feeling of self-determination and self-governance by claiming their independence and managing their security issues. A concerted effort to combat terrorism in the Sahel would promote Pan-African unity and solidarity. The Sahelian nations have the potential to serve as a model for enhanced collaboration and unity throughout the continent, if they exhibit a strong commitment to tackling internal issues jointly. Furthermore, cooperation would make it easier to pool resources and experience, which would result in a more effective use of military, financial, and intelligence resources. Through the avoidance of redundant efforts and resources, nations could enhance their capacities and optimize the effectiveness of their counter-terrorism tactics. As a result of these cooperative efforts, a complete regional strategy that is suited to the particular difficulties and dynamics of the Sahel may be developed. Countries can work toward lasting peace and prosperity by tackling the underlying causes of terrorism and extremism, such as socioeconomic inequality and governance concerns. Reduced reliance on foreign aid will benefit African nations and lessen their susceptibility to outside interests and pressures. This might encourage a more independent and long-term approach to security, enabling the Sahel countries to give priority to their own agendas for development and interests. However, why does Ibrahim Traore place such a high value on security? That's because the very security dilemma that has prevented African nations from progressing is the reason for this. The enduring issue has prevented African nations from concentrating on growth and advancement. Furthermore, the military receives the lion's share of the budget, starving other industries. Terrorism is the cause of all this. But he made a point regarding something that no one had ever considered. He emphasized that only those African nations that were once French colonies exhibit an elevated prevalence of terrorism. Put another way, Britain, Portugal, Germany, Italy, and Belgium all had colonies in Africa. However, only nations under French domination have experienced terrorism. This is due to the fact that despite gaining independence, only France remained in its colonies. It desired to take advantage of them and their assets. But since they were on their own, they had to make up some justifications. Thus, it was the beginning of terrorism in these colonies. It made the deployment of foreign forces necessary. For this reason, a number of nations, notably Mali, have said unequivocally that France arms and finances terrorists. This demonstrates that terrorism is the main cause of all issues and that France wants it to remain in the Sahel. What actions does this inspire the African nations to take? As Ibrahim Traore has stated, the solution is straightforward. African nations must get together to combat terrorism as a whole. Whether or if France finances it, it must cease the nation's never-ending cycle of dependency and internal strife. He made it plain and gave everyone his word that unless this security issue was fixed, he would not schedule elections. He said Burkina Faso will postpone elections until security concerns were addressed because of this. Traore had previously promised that by 2024, democratic elections will return. For more videos about Black history, culture, civilization, and identity, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now let's go on. He said that the election will not take place in just Ouagadougou, Bougouriba, and a few more nearby towns. The right to freely select their president must belong to every Burkinabe. For the benefit of the Burkinabe people, candidates should be allowed to run for office wherever in the country. That's the main point. After the coup in 2022, Traore came to power amid continuing acts of jihadist terror, including assaults carried out by Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Traore made an effort to enlist people to defend the fatherland force as civilians. But things haven't gotten much better because Traore recently declared that they were at war. Traore disclosed plans to change the constitution to make sure it represented the desire of the people. Traore had previously promised a return to democracy and that presidential elections will take place in July 2024. Traore had originally given himself 2 or 3 months to strengthen security in Burkina Faso after seizing power. But even a year later, the country is still dealing with Islamist attacks. When Traore, then 34 years old, took office as interim president, he made history as the youngest leader in history. He promised to retake territory and ease the transition so that elections could take place in July 2024. Traore announced his intention to amend the nation's constitution in part, emphasizing on state television that the current wording represents the opinions of a select group of enlightened people at the expense of the general populace. Ibrahim Traore is aware that the main issue is always security. Foreign meddling in Africa will always be possible unless it is resolved and terrorism is eradicated. That is not what he wants. He seeks to eliminate all justifications available to the West for visiting and plundering Africa's riches. African nations cannot tolerate a situation similar to the Libyan civil war, which broke out after a brilliant leader like Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated due to foreign meddling, as he himself stated. In March 2011, about 2 weeks after France launched airstrikes on Libya, Hillary Clinton received an intelligence brief from her old partner Sidney Blumenthal. The memo presented claims regarding the true motivations of France for overthrowing Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. It implied that President Nicolas Sarkozy was driven by less than honorable reasons, such as a stake in Libyan oil and worries that Gaddafi would use his substantial gold reserves to challenge France's hegemony in the area. The amount of Blumenthal's engagement is evident in the correspondence from Clinton's office that was made public. Almost 1/3 of the emails that Clinton received concerning Libya came from Blumenthal. Though Blumenthal did not hold an official post at the State Department, the Clinton Foundation-affiliated individual frequently provided updates to Clinton, frequently using anonymous sources purportedly connected to Libya's political establishment. Together, through their company, Osprey Blumenthal and his partner, Former CIA agent Tyler Drumheller looked forward to commercial opportunities in post-war Libya. Drumheller helped prepare these briefings. Blumenthal's emails to Clinton contained strange claims, like Libyan elites wanting better relations with Israel and accusations that European spy services were helping to create a semi-autonomous tribal zone in eastern Libya, even though these efforts had not yielded any real results. The report contained some very interesting material that emphasized Gaddafi's purported plan to underpin a new African currency with a significant quantity of gold and silver. According to the sources, France interfered to stop this action because of concern for how it may affect the CFA franc, which France supported in West Africa. This would be the first stage in the process establishing a new arrangement, according to the document. A particular development affected Sarkozy's choice to take part in the Libyan invasion. Even while Blumenthal did not work for the State Department at the time he sent the gold conspiracy, it was obvious that Hillary Clinton valued his opinions and occasionally asked her staff to take the material into account. For example, Blumenthal's intelligence reported on August 27, 2012, that a new Libyan president will pursue a low-key relationship with Israel. Clinton sent the email to Jacob Sullivan, her top policy assistant, along with a suggestion to share it with the Israelis. More doubt was expressed about some of the intelligence findings. Clinton's advisors said that not all of the material was reliable. The Blumenthal letter ascribes less than favorable motivations to the French president's decision to intervene in Libya. However, it is unclear what Clinton's team thought of it. As demonstrations turned into a civil war in the spring of 2011, Nicolas Sarkozy spearheaded the call for an air campaign across Europe against Gaddafi. To meet with the National Transition Council, NTC, whom the Blumenthal memo described as France's client, Sarkozy sent the French scholar Bernard-Henri Lévy. Subsequently, Sarkozy urged other NATO members to launch military operations by acknowledging the NTC as the legitimate government of Libya. Clinton visited with President Sarkozy in France just 2 weeks before Blumenthal wrote the Gaddafi gold memo, and the president pressed her to back an air assault in Libya. At the time, Sarkozy openly defended his backing for military action by claiming that it was an attempt to stop a murderous rampage and to assist Libyans who were trying to break free from slavery. The Blumenthal memo, however, tells a different story. 4 main elements, according to Blumenthal's sources who briefed Clinton, drove Sarkozy's decision. Aside from worries over a new African currency supported by Libya, these included the oil from Libya, the French military's ambition to gain international recognition, the French government's aim to strengthen its position at home, and the French dominance in North Africa. Sarkozy faced re-election the next year in the spring of 2011, with a record low approval rating of about 70% disapproval. There were those who perceived Sarkozy's move to step in as a last-ditch effort to increase his standing. According to surveys conducted in February 2011, 66% of French people were in favor of France's participation in Libya. It so happened that Sarkozy had a tense relationship with the dictator of Libya. Shortly after Sarkozy was elected president in 2007, Gaddafi traveled to France to negotiate a contentious $200 million arms deal. In an effort to appease the dictator of Libya, Sarkozy gave him access to the Rambouillet forest, which was previously the hunting site of French kings, and allowed him to have a private tour of the Louvre accompanied by his female bodyguards. During his stay, Gaddafi even set up a heated Bedouin tent in the gardens of the Hôtel de Marigny, which was used for official visits. Gaddafi's financial backing for Sarkozy's 2007 election campaign sparked unexpected developments in Sarkozy's relationship with him. An investigation website in France released a 2006 document detailing Gaddafi's intentions to donate €50 million to Sarkozy's campaign. In 2012, a paper that Sarkozy has contested, the paper was verified by former insiders of the Gaddafi government and appeared from the regime's archives. But the Blumenthal intelligence does show that Sarkozy's war grounds were not taken seriously, even in American intelligence circles. Significant inferential evidence also exists connecting France's oil interests with its desire to see Gaddafi overthrown. A letter from Libya's National Transitional Council was published in the French daily Libération in 2011. It stated that in return for France's complete and long-term support, Libya would give up 35% of its crude oil production. This letter was supported by another previously made public Blumenthal document, which told Clinton that early in the rebellion, French intelligence agencies spoke with NTC leaders in order to establish French control in the post-Gaddafi oil sector of Libya. The March 22, 2011 document titled L'Argent Parlé, How the French Created the National Libyan Council, warning Clinton that the French intelligence agency, DGSE, had started a series of covert meetings with well-known Libyan opposition activists, giving them money and advice, which means money talks in French. Under Sarkozy's directives, these French agents pledged that France would recognize the council as the legitimate government of Libya after it was established. Combat of Sirte. After NATO airstrikes hit his convoys during the 2011 NATO military intervention in Libya, the former Libyan leader was found west of Sirte. Given that the entire operation was motivated by money and power, the notion that this intervention was made to protect the Libyan people from their dictator is laughable in light of the current situation. The forces of the National Transitional Council quickly apprehended and murdered Gaddafi. When loyalist forces tried to rescue Gaddafi, they were shot and killed, according to the NTC's initial statement. In contrast, a video showing Gaddafi's last moments showed rebel militants attacking him, one of them unsettlingly brandishing a bayonet before Gaddafi was shot several times. Gaddafi's death was criticized since it was thought to be against international law. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch insisted on an independent autopsy and an examination of Gaddafi's dying circumstances. Fox News revealed the involvement of a U.S. Predator drone in the bombing on Gaddafi's convoy, just before his death, in a story titled, U.S. Drone Involved in Final Gaddafi, Strike as Obama Heralds Regime's End, that was published immediately following reports of Gaddafi's death. Given that the rebels in Libya had repeatedly said that they would not accept overt foreign military support in overthrowing Gaddafi's American government officials, covert military support, including the shipment of arms to the opposition, was used. Recognizing the enormous symbolic significance of these activities, the immediate objective, after Gaddafi's murder, was to quickly begin the delivery of humanitarian aid to eastern Libya and then to western Libya. All of this history is known to Captain Ibrahim Traore now. He is aware that he must never provide the West with a justification for meddling on the African continent. This will be accomplished by creating a military alliance with African nations, like to NATO, rather than by adopting Western principles. Through this military cooperation, African nations will be able to eradicate terrorism while simultaneously maintaining their territorial integrity and foreign security. This is how he intends to alter Africa's destiny. How do you feel? Is Ibrahim Traore able to bring African nations together to form a military alliance? Is it accurate to say that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have already signed a security agreement protecting themselves from foreign invasions? Share your opinions with us on whether Ibrahim Traore is the man that Africa sorely needs. Would you like to see more videos similar to this one? Click the bell icon next to it and subscribe to our channel if the answer is yes. We have made the decision to present videos on a topic that is rarely discussed: Black history, culture, and civilization, as well as examples of how amazing Black people have always been. I appreciate you viewing, and be sure to tune in for the next one.